see. Not sure if it is streaming yet. So when someone can see this, maybe say something in the chat, and then I'll know if it's actually properly streaming now, instead of what is going on right now, where I'm in the dark. I haven't streamed for a long time, so, and I'm on a new device, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm live right now. I may be. I may not be. We'll see if someone says something in the chat. Okay. Chat sees me. Cool. I'm going to wait 2 minutes or so before I get started. I'm back for live streams. I'll talk about where I've been, some of the stuff I've been working on. And then kind of 2 other topics I want to talk about, and then I'll leave the last 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So, it should be good. Let's see. There is a big delay on the stream today because I'm doing the stream with a big delay. Yeah, because my internet is a bit iffy, and so I figured it was better to delay things quite a bit, and then that way, the quality can be maintained. So we'll see. I've called this new series of streams TAKT with RMTransit, which I thought was a cool name. It's going to be a bit more podcasty in the sense that I'm going to try to mostly stay on topic and just talk about preset topics that I determine before the stream happens. Today's topics are, again, where I've been. The second one is about politics and transit, sort of. I think it's an interesting point. And then the Quebec City Tram I'm also going to talk about, which might seem kind of random, but I think it's interesting. And then at the end of the stream, I will take a few questions, and then I'll be off. So looks like we basically have people. So I guess I can start with where I've been. So again, the idea of this series of streams is basically just that for now I'm going to also don't ask about that. I'm going to try to stream like every 2 weeks because I enjoy talking about public transportation. I just not making videos anymore. It's just not a thing. I actually sold all of my equipment, so I'm on a new computer, etc. And yeah, I thought streams would be good because I can still do a live stream. It's pretty low effort outside of the hour of like incredible intensity, and so I think that this is practical. I can still talk about the topics I like talking about, public transportation, etc., but in a more relaxed format. No intention to come back and make regular videos outside of the videos I already mentioned that I was interested in making. So Moscow, Beijing, and probably a couple other Chinese cities, Chinese high-speed rail. That's mostly it. There might be a couple other things, but as you've seen, there hasn't been a real video on the channel for months at this point, and so should be an interesting experience. If you didn't watch my I'm done video, you should go watch it. That's my first comment. If you don't already kind of know where I've been, then you should go watch my final video. Sorry, I'm standing desk and I was going like this, which isn't helpful. Yes, I am streaming. I had a kid last year. Priorities shifted, many things, and so I decided I was done with YouTube. If we're honest, I can be honest with you, you're watching this live stream, which means you care to some extent. I have become kind of cynical about public transportation in Canada. I think a lot of people are cynical about public transportation in Canada, but I was, through my channel, known to be pretty positive about it. I talk to a lot of people who actually work on things behind the scenes, and it's depressing. There's just so many poor decisions being made, bad leadership, poor planning. A lot of this stuff, the reasons I made the videos I made were to try to highlight those things to people. Like, transit projects are not universally good. The way that a lot of our systems are headed is not a positive direction. Cities internationally kick our asses in terms of not just having a big network, but the way public transport works. And we don't have a good excuse. We need to have better systems. And so that kind of cynicism crept in, and sort of exhaustion from doing YouTube. And so, yeah, I decided that at the end of last year, with a ton of videos under my belt, and with me trying to kind of go and make 10 seconds. I'm trying to open the chat larger so I can actually see it. It's kind of challenging. It's not working. Great, wonderful. It just sort of felt, I tried to sit down and write some videos, and it was really hard. And I kind of decided, I just went, yeah, you know what, maybe it's time to hang up the hat and go out on a high note, so to speak. And so I decided to do that. And I don't have any real regrets about that. I do wish the channel got, like, this is kind of egotistical. I do wish it had a bit more notoriety. I feel like it covers public transport really well, and there are a lot of professionals, etc., who watch it. But then when I go and see media coverage of public transportation, it's still bad. And so I'm sort of like, was there not like a learning experience here? So that's a bit frustrating, but I'm happy about all the stuff I made. I think a ton of the videos I made have a lot of staying power. If you haven't watched a lot of them, there are a lot of good ones that I made. Probably some not great ones too, which is kind of the nature of YouTube. But I think it's kind of unique. It was pretty technical. People always complain like, oh, you didn't cover this thing correctly or whatever. But I think I actually did a pretty good job covering cities around the world in all kinds of different places where English is obviously often not the first language, etc. And so I'm pretty proud with how things went. I don't have a script, so I am going to look at the chat and see what people are saying, so I can see if it motivates me to say anything else. As I said, I have a couple kind of like planned topics for this stream I'm going to actually properly cycle through, which is why I created a proper name, TAKT with RMTransit, because I'm actually going to be trying to talk about specific things instead of just rambling and going all over the place. But I guess within a given topic, I can talk about different things. One thing I should note, if you're just coming onto the stream now, I have linked the next stream in the description of this stream, so you can set a reminder for the next time I do a stream. For now, they're all going to be at the same time, but I might try to vary it over time if I find like a lot of people are saying that it doesn't work well for their time zone or whatever. Just looking at... Okay. Just scanning. Someone's mentioning they can tell from Twitter. I still am on Twitter more than I'd like to be honest. I'm on Mastodon, Twitter, Blue Sky. You can go follow me. We can chat. Yes, if we had modern stuff a decade after talking about how we're going to get modern stuff, I would feel less cynical. When will I cable manage the TV? Yeah, it's a good question. I guess just the fact that it's just like 2 cables, it just doesn't bother me that much. Oh my goodness, some very aggressive moderation, which is very nice. Thank you for that. Thoughts on where I think Amtrak will go? Nowhere good. Yeah, it's not great. You've been hitting the gym again. Check out my last video, my retirement video. Do you think the biggest problem is political will? Not at all. Yeah. Are you still going to be posting? I'm going to be doing some streams. And as I said in my retirement video, I do want to do like a Moscow explainer once the Russia-Ukraine thing settles down, because it feels weird to cover it until then. The war, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Beijing as well, and then some various other Chinese stuff, because it's very interesting. Let me see. What games are you playing on PS5? None, because I have a kid, and also because I didn't before, because I just don't have time to play video games. And I find if I sit down in front of a video game console, I just feel like I'm wasting my time with it when there's like a million more important things to work on doing. Do you think Line 5 will open this year? That's a question for the end. What's with the hyper cynical tweets regarding Metrolinx on Twitter? Good question, again, for the end. Have you bought a car yet, given where you live? Any thoughts on how Southeast Asia is progressing? Thoughts on cracking open a beer, sitting on the balcony, and chilling out? That sounds amazing. Okay, I'm just looking to see if there's anything here that I want to address. No, it doesn't look like it. So yeah. Had a kid. It's been 2/3 of a year now. This is a long time. It's fun, but it's tiring. Not a ton of sleep, and just a big life change. And so that's challenging. YouTube, I've been trying to put out my thoughts in other formats. And so I'm doing this stream, and I will be doing more, again, link in the description for the next one in about 2 weeks. But I've also been blogging. So if you're interested in Toronto specific stuff, I have a blog for that called Next Toronto that is not just transit. Heavily influenced by transit, and a lot of transit will be discussed, but it's sort of more about how do we make Toronto great. And that transit is definitely a big part of that. I think everyone would agree that transit is a big part of what makes the city good, because it allows for all kinds of other things. But it's other things besides transit, like nice architecture, attractive public spaces, interesting people. And so I thought that was a good idea. I'm quite passionate about Toronto. I lived there for a long time, and I think it's good to try to push for it to become a great global city. I think that, on public transport, Toronto is really second only to New York in North America, but it's worse than a lot of other cities on other things, right? Like San Francisco has a bigger tech scene. Chicago has like more interesting cultural institutions and architecture. Obviously, New York beats it in various things. Vancouver has a nicer airport. Montreal has better bike infrastructure and isn't crazy and trying to actively rip it out, at least not anywhere to the same extent as Toronto. And so I think that there's still a lot of reason to be pushing for better, and so that's why I'm doing the Next Toronto blog. And then I have a second blog called 5%, which is about self-improvement, because yes, I lost weight, and I've been working on myself and on learning and being healthy and all of these other things. And I thought it would be good to do a blog where I talk about that stuff, because if you followed my other blogs for any period of time, I did like off-topic posts on this kind of stuff periodically, and I thought it would be a good idea to just make that its own blog. So I have those two things going right now. And then on the Patreon, which I am still running, I have like international-ish stuff, because obviously that's not Toronto, at least unless I can draw it back to Toronto. It's just international, so I've been posting that stuff there, and I'm not sure what'll happen with that in the future, but that's kind of what I've been doing for now. So yeah, 2 blogs. They're in the description of this live stream. If you're not following them, I really suggest you do. They're both 100% free. I might do some paid posts, but my goal is to never do very many. The thing that I don't think people understand about Patreon and platforms like this, any kind of platform where creators have to make paid content, but where that creator is, generally speaking, making free content, it's very hard to find the motivation to make good paid content. The reason I say that is because you want your best videos to be viewed by everyone. You don't want your best videos to have to be paid for, right? And so it creates this bad incentive where, and obviously the same thing holds for blogging. If you have to pay for it, then you don't want to write as much. You don't want to write this. The quality is just not going to be the same because you want, again, the best ideas to go to as many people as possible. And so that's a little bit of an insight there. I'm just going to take a look through the good old chat. Someone was saying, great article on why Transit City in Toronto was a bad idea. I was happy with that article. Someone's saying, how does a kid affect the way you use public transport? I'm actually going to talk about that in the next stream. So set a reminder for that, because that will get a whole section in the next stream. Alfie is saying incredible things like that Pearson should be a Costco. I think that's the thing is, I will say questions like that do become, they become so exhausting over time, right? When you do YouTube and the same question gets asked 1,000 times and you sort of just wish people would watch 20% of the videos before asking things that seem like they might be addressed. Do you post articles outside of Substack? Relevant to the blog, so I guess I'll answer that here. No, I just post on Substack. I follow a lot of people on Substack who I think are very good. If you don't like certain people on Substack, I would say it is like YouTube. There's a lot of YouTubers who I am not fond of, but I still use YouTube because I'm just following the people I'm interested in. And Substack, you're only going to get emails about the people who you subscribe to. It's just a platform for newsletters and blogs. So yeah, just subscribe to mine. Don't subscribe to any others, or subscribe to ones that you think are good. Rights for dads. Are you going to run for office? And talking about rights for dads. Someone saying, how will the pending conquest of Canada by America affect public transport? I just want to say, when Americans say this, assuming this person is American, it's like making a joke about someone's mother dying, okay? It's not really funny at all in any way. It's just terrible, and yeah, terrible. Don't even bring that up. It's just unacceptable. What do you think of the Uber and Lyft style vans replacing bus routes? Again, end of the chat. I will at the end of the stream, I'll talk about various Q&A for a little while, but I'm just going to talk about the main topic / look to see if anyone has something relevant to the topic at hand, which right now is where I've been. Paige Saunders, beautiful question. Just talking about how streaming is a good way to leave the plate spinning. What did you settle on for fitness long term? I honestly I kind of believe that from my experience doing a crap ton of exercise in the last year, but also just kind of common sense, if you do one thing, you kind of are going to become more prone to injure yourself in a specific way, right? If you go running a lot, you might injure your Achilles or something. I injured my Achilles, not from running. But because of that, my strategy is to kind of try to do a ton of different exercise. So I use a rowing machine, I go cycling, climbing, running, swimming. Obviously, some things are just like swimming, for example, is just less likely to injure you in general. And so I've been doing that a lot. But the rowing machine is the most practical. I just have a rowing machine in the other room. And so I enjoy doing that. But I think that's kind of my approach. I also try to walk a ton. I do live in a suburban area, but I don't generally drive. And so that means walking a ton. Like to go to the pool, 5-kilometer walk. So I walk a lot. And that actually, that has an impact at scale. So for general questions, you should ask at the end of the stream when I'll do kind of a general questions thing, and I'll just kind of run through until I feel like the questions are not doing it for me anymore. Has becoming a father changed your views on transit or certain accessibility needs? Next stream, I'm gonna touch on that. Tell, do you think Canada will be in a good place post-election, no matter who you vote for? That I'll address in a second, because I'm going to be talking about that shortly. More REM stations opening soon. That is exciting. How do you stay motivated to do all the things you do? Good question. End of stream, please. When you get run over by a bus. Where do you like to... So for general questions, end of the stream. Do you think Canada should open up the monopolies for buses? I think we should have other manufacturers. BYD is not great. We have some BYD buses in Toronto. They've been bad, so I'm not in a rush to get BYD buses. But other buses, sure. What have you been doing for work? I haven't been working, so yeah, that's why I made lots of videos in advance. Though I haven't been working, I have been taking care of a kid, so that's been my work. Okay, so the next topic of the stream, as I mentioned at the top of the stream, what I'm going to be doing with this TAKT and RMTransit series is trying to, highlight a couple key topics in each stream, and I'll try to move between them, looking at the chat for inspiration about things to talk about on that topic. The second topic I wanted to talk about was something I proposed as an op-ed, but then didn't hear back, and I gotta make stuff, so I thought, hey, I should talk about it here. Maybe I'll write a blog post. It's just a reflection, because there is a Canadian election coming up. And pause, because I think this could be interesting even if you're not Canadian. I think the biggest outcome of Justin Trudeau being elected was not marijuana being legalized or the child tax credit, although I guess those are both actually pretty visible and significant things. It was public transportation projects. I say public transportation projects because there wasn't as much progress on creating funding models so that public transport can be frequent everywhere. It kind of remains frequent in the places it was already frequent, and it is not frequent in the places it was already not frequent. But what I think is so interesting is that from about 2015 to present, Justin Trudeau was Prime Minister for the vast majority of that time. Canada has taken a real leap in public transportation. If we talk about pre-2015, the last big projects were the West LRT in Calgary. Toronto didn't really have any projects since the early 2000s. Montreal had the Laval extension of the metro. Vancouver had the Canada Line. So it had been, years after that, into the early 2010s, there was not a lot of transit projects that were deep into completion. The Eglinton Crosstown had been started, but it's still not open, so I can't say it was far along. But what's been so interesting under the Trudeau government is because they were quite upfront with federal funding for projects, and they basically seemingly gave federal funding to any project that had wide support and felt pretty advanced. So many new projects got started when Trudeau was Prime Minister, which is obviously really positive. I think I don't like everything that Justin Trudeau did as Prime Minister, but I think that the public transport impact is going to be huge, and because we've been slow to deliver projects, it's not super visible, but there was so much public transport that was approved and funded when his government was in power. So let me give you a rundown, right? And some of these projects, they might have been from before, but I think most of them were not. Okay, I'll start at the west of the country. So Vancouver got the Broadway subway and the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain, as well as various other smaller things like new rolling stock, which is nice to be fair. Calgary got nothing, but it was mostly because of the city and province fighting with each other. The Green Line, I remember the Green Line being talked about literally right when Justin Trudeau was elected, and then it was called the Setway. It was a southeast transit way. So that project could have been advanced if the other governments had gotten it together. In Edmonton, there's the Capital Line South extension, which is happening now. There's the Metro Line extension, which is kind of a weird phased thing that's already partially opened, and more of it will open eventually. I think the entire Valley Line, but at the very least the western portion of the Valley Line. So a bunch of projects in BC and Alberta. In Ontario, you've got the Hamilton Light Rail Transit Project, the Huron-Ontario Light Rail Transit Project. Ion, I think, was from before. Finch, I would say the Finch West Light Rail Project, Eglinton West Light Rail Project, Ontario Line Subway, the Line 2 subway extension, GO expansion, and all the GO transit stuff. An absolute ton there. O-Train Phase 2, I think Phase 1 was under Harper, I could be wrong, but like a huge chunk of Ottawa's rail network was approved under the previous government. The Blue Line extension in Montreal, as well as the entire REM, if you didn't see. Yeah, the entire REM network was under Trudeau, and that's 67 kilometers, essentially a doubling of length of Montreal's rapid transit system. Not as high capacity as the metro and less urban in nature, but very exciting still. As well as the Quebec City Tram, which I'm going to talk about shortly as our third topic today. So I just think, under Trudeau, of all the things in terms of significance, I think that all of the transit projects that have been moved forward into construction is the biggest thing. It's really exciting to me. There's a super chat. I will address that when I get a chance. But thank you. I appreciate it. Small Cat. Great usernames. And like when you look across Canada since 2015, Vancouver's got a bunch of new lines. Edmonton's got a new line and a bunch of extensions. Calgary could have got a new line, though I have mixed feelings on the Green Line, as you'll know if you've watched any of my videos on it. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that it got more criticism and critique. There's obviously various non-rail projects across the country. They're just less visible and a little harder to talk about in a concise way. Toronto is getting, the GTHA is getting like 3 or 4 different tramways, a new subway line, a bunch of subway extensions, ton of regional rail improvements. I wouldn't say doubling, but broadly, I would say there's like a 20 to 40% increase in the amount of transit rail in different cities, right? So like Vancouver, it's more on the 20% side. Toronto, 40+%. If you include GO, then it's like quadrupling the size of the rapid transit rail network. Montreal with the REM, it's like a doubling in size. Ottawa, over the existing just short stub of the Confederation line, like a tripling or something. So much new rail transit. I have an entire spreadsheet where I just record stations, and the number of rapid transit or rail transit stations in the country has just gone up astronomically in the last decade. And there's so many projects that are just kind of early stages now that will probably still get completed because they were started with federal funding that was super available. So I think it's a really cool legacy, and I think it's going to change Canada for the better, like in a huge way. When the REM and all of the projects in Toronto are done, as well as the Blue Line extension, I think Toronto and Montreal, they're not going to feel like Hong Kong or Tokyo, like incredible transit networks. Hong Kong's network isn't that big, it's just really well run. But they will feel like substantial networks, definitely unlike anything in America besides New York, very much in line with kind of like moderate-sized European cities, like maybe not Barcelona or Paris, but very much like Brussels or Amsterdam or something like that. So I think that's really, really exciting. The country, and this is the thing, it can be easy to be cynical about the way things are going, and there's a lot of stupidity that happens in the public transport industry in Canada, but the reality is that tons of progress is going to be made and is just sort of locked in, like it's just going to happen. These projects are already under construction. They will run eventually. There might be delays in construction and all kinds of crap, but it will happen, and it will make cities so much better. And the combination of that, as well as all the additional density that we're going to get because of the pressure there is now to build more housing, I think it's going to lead to a much better country and a much more urban country. And I think that's a really exciting and positive thing. And so I think it's a huge positive legacy of the Justin Trudeau Liberal government. I'm going to quickly go through the chat to see what people have to say about this topic, and then I'm going to go on to my next topic. Bergen. I think Bergen, Norway is a great example for a lot of cities that are not huge, but that could benefit from some rail transit. How goes learning about Rust and other programming languages? I am doing my best, but it's slow going because I have like 30 minutes of free time a day to do it, and I'm often tired, so not making a lot of progress very quickly. Someone's asking, what is TAKT? A TAKT is a term. It's kind of like it describes frequency. When I say like a 30-minute TAKT, it's like a 30-minute recurring schedule. So if you look at the German transport plan nationally, or the Swiss national transport plan, the kind of pulse scheduling, the pulse is called a TAKT. So that's what it is. And I think it's a cool word. So that's why I wanted to use it. When did you decide that weekly videos were your next step going forward? I'm not doing weekly videos, so not sure what you mean. Sorry, I am just going through the chat. Are using a phone as a mic or some sort of external mic. MacBook Pro, good microphone. It's one of the redeeming features of Apple's computers, even though they do have a lot of issues with them. People are asking, are you going to make a video about Transit X? Probably not, unless X is Beijing, Moscow, random big Chinese cities like Chongqing and Chengdu and Guangzhou, or Chinese high-speed rail. Then probably not, sadly. So if you live in any of these places, if you have access to footage from, say, Chinese cities or Moscow or Chinese high-speed rail footage, would love to talk to you. Send me an email. It's in the YouTube channel. Yeah. There's a bunch of good questions here. I'm going to leave questions to the very end. Oh yes, someone is mentioning how do you feel about the election, etc. I will talk about that once I'm done going through the chat, and then I'm going to move on to the next topic. Have you visited Calgary? Yeah, I have videos from Calgary. Thank you for the super chat, Small Cat. Is transit a liberal thing? Guess I can answer this now. No. Lots of places that are not liberal have public transport. So, yeah. Do you think San Jose has potential? Which San Jose are we talking about? Opinions on Alto high-speed rail. End of the stream. I'll take questions like that. Okay, I think all of these things are covered. Ivan said to Super Chat, thank you, Ivan. Would you like to come to Hong Kong? Yeah, Hong Kong's nice. I love Hong Kong. Great transit system. San Jose, California. Okay, San Jose, California. Probably it's not irredeemable, but VTA is not a great transit system. The light rail is bad, like many in America. It's not very fast or very frequent. They removed a line, which is not a good sign. I think it's reflective. You look at San Jose, right? One of the richest places in the world because it's Silicon Valley, right? And all of these new offices, all of these people who needed to get to jobs, quite a decentralized city, tons of growth. It had the potential to be an incredible transit system. I know it's very re-smarting of me to say, but I think if a place like San Jose had built a SkyTrain type system, probably more Copenhagen Metro, but something that, allowed for a lot of frequent services between, the main train station and, Caltrain. There's a bunch of Caltrain stops. There's BART as well. I'll mention that in a second. If it had allowed that to connect with like Facebook, Google, Apple, all of the big tech companies that have, for better or for worse, giant offices that employ huge numbers of people who are generally speaking pretty friendly to the idea of getting on public transport. It could be a huge transport success story, but instead they built a kind of crappy light rail system. The vehicles are even rather ugly, and yeah, not great. They are doing the BART extension. It's going to cost a ludicrous amount of money. It's going to be bored halfway to the other side of the earth. Alan Fisher did a video. I agree with some of the stuff he said in it. Yeah, rough. I'm just looking here. Thanks for the super chat, Puilela Polyps. I was not in Philadelphia with Miles in Transit, even though Miles in Transit is great. Okay, I'm going to go on to my next topic, which is the Quebec City Tram project, which I think is very exciting. Before that, though, I want to talk about how do I feel about the Canadian federal election. I respect the need people have in their hearts to have a different government after having the same government for 10 years. And so I think that there has been desire for change. We lost the old prime minister and a lot of his policies. There's a new prime minister, a leader of the Liberal Party, Mark Carney. I think that was kind of required because, again, we needed a refresh. It had been a long time with one person leading the country. The Conservatives have just tanked in the polls and the Liberals have shot up. This is about as good of an outcome as I think could have possibly happened. The Conservatives, I'm not really here to talk politics, but on the issue of public transport, they're just not very good. They're better than American Republicans because you can't be worse than American Republicans, but they're not great. The Liberals have, as I just mentioned, been pretty good, at least on getting things built. Maybe not doing everything I would like and the reforms I would like, but they've been much better than the Conservatives were previously. It was a really depressing time, actually, and so I am, I think, as happy as I was going to be, because it was going to be either a new guy running the Liberals or the Conservatives, who probably would have thrown the brakes on public transport for quite a while and done a lot of P3s and stuff, which we're already doing, but yeah, that wouldn't have been good. So current outcome, much better. I'm looking at the chat. Yeah, it's important to note regarding Trudeau's transit record that it was just money. And so there's a lot of variability. Ontario was already planning to build a lot of stuff, and all of the money from the federal government just sort of accelerated that. Quebec took much worse advantage of it, right? The REM is cool, but honestly, for Montreal to have gotten as much as Toronto got, albeit Montreal smaller, I think Montreal, on a per capita basis, could have gotten 2 tram lines and a couple metro extensions as well as the REM. But the government didn't really, push things through. The Ontario government had clear projects. They were like, we're going to do these things, and so the funding was there. Alberta also. Edmonton did okay, but Calgary, just sad, right? And Vancouver, I also think, underperformed a bit. Could have had more projects primed. Yeah. Thomas is saying, can you please give us a 3-second overview of the political landscape? If you could give me a sense of what you're curious about, I can do that. And then I'm going to talk about Quebec City. The NDP came out today committing to the high-speed rail Quebec and Windsor project. The NDP, being Canada's kind of far-left party, not going to get elected. So they say a lot of stuff with knowing that they're not going to win. Especially they're not going to win now. They might have won potentially with a better leader and better policies and stuff. But they often just say a lot of things because they seemingly know they're not going to have to actually do the stuff that they are talking about. Waiting to see. So I'm just going to do a brief intermission while I'm waiting for someone to respond to the thing I was talking about. If you're just coming into the stream now, I'm going to be doing streams every 2 weeks because I still like talking about public transportation, and this feels like a good medium to do it through. Link to the next stream in the description. I'm also writing 2 different blogs. If you're interested in those, you should subscribe. They're free. It would really help. But besides that, I think I'm going to get into talking about the Quebec City tram. So I think Quebec City should be much larger. This kind of comes back to the issue that Alfie was bringing up, which is that there was a lot of money on the table in the last 10 years for public transportation, and it's kind of on the provinces and cities for not lining projects up to take advantage of it. I think in some ways, Toronto was not so large compared to the rest of the cities in the country. Pre-Trudeau, like at least in infrastructure terms, the other cities were growing and Toronto was pretty stagnant. But I have this kind of belief that Toronto is going to be like London now, because Toronto has gotten seemingly half the transit projects in the entire country in the last 10 years. It's going to have overwhelmingly more public transport options in terms of subways, trams, regional trains than any other place in the country. And that leads to more development, population growth, and this sort of dominance of the country. And so I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but I think that's the direction the country's going in. And the way to offset that would be for Quebec to try to get Montreal to become a larger city, try to encourage its growth. And I think the same thing for Quebec City. There's so much potential for it to be like a really nice metropolitan center, and yet it isn't really there, right? And so I think the tram project is interesting because it's a single tram line, so there are like many small French towns basically that have single tram lines, but it's the beginning of a trajectory that could take Quebec City from kind of a town, a small city, and send it more towards being, say, Calgary-sized or something like that. Calgary isn't a huge city. It's similar size to Ottawa or something like that. But it's big enough. I think Adelaide in Australia would be similar size as well. It's basically big enough to have a couple urban rail lines, a nice downtown. It's the minimum size of what I would call, proper city. It feels like a city. And so I think Quebec City should be a city. And I think that having more of a policy of growing it, would be really valuable for Canada in that it would have now another French-speaking city. Because Montreal isn't, some might say it's not a French-speaking city, right? Like, obviously, I think it is probably, like 70% French first language speakers, but there's a lot of English speakers in Montreal. Quebec City would be a truly francophone city, and so I think it'd be really interesting. There was a lot of policies that I think the Quebec government should have instituted. Start doing intercity rail yourselves. You don't have to wait for the federal government to do high-speed rail. Do some sort of improved Via Rail Quebec service, something like that. Build a small metro system in Quebec City, like Copenhagen, like a mini metro type of thing, sort of like Toulouse has in France or Rennes. Basically, I think Quebec City should be much larger. I think it would be good for Quebec, it would be good for Canada, but it's not. And I think the tram is the first step towards a bigger Quebec City. Quebec City with its own hockey team, Quebec City with an airport that you don't have to take a kind of crappy bus to get to. Quebec City that is easier to get to from the rest of the country. And so it's exciting to me. The project that they're building is 19 kilometers long, which means it's similar in size to like 5 of the projects being built in Ontario, but who's counting? I think it's going to use battery trams. Not the whole thing won't be on battery, but parts of it will be on battery. I don't really see this as a good idea or necessary. Quebec has really cold weather, which isn't great for batteries, and it's kind of skirting around / going under the most historic parts of the city. So even though I think that's a silly excuse for not having overhead wires, it seems like the only other excuse there would be for having overhead wires. And so I think that it's just kind of, that element's kind of weird, but I don't care too much. Getting a tram, 19 kilometers. I hope that the urban design kind of meets Quebec standards. If there's one thing I can complain about with the tram projects built in the rest of Canada, especially in Ontario, Edmonton is a little better. They're just ugly. Like the trams themselves are fine. They look like something from 2000. They're fine. They look kind of crappy, but they're okay. But the infrastructure, the stops are just kind of bland. The streetscapes are ugly. It's very much slap a tram down a giant street with 8 lanes on it. So it doesn't really have the kind of nice, urban feel with the trams snaking around. It's really straight line with a tram down a giant street. It feels more Chinese provincial city than Europe. In the case of the Ontario trams, I would hope that Quebec City can do something more like France or Spain or something. I think that would be a real win. The bigger win would be trying to get to a place where you can deliver tram projects and they're not super expensive. I think if it were the case that a single tram line doesn't cost like $5 or $6 billion, which I think is what the Quebec City project is supposed to cost, which is insane, by the way. That's subway money, easily subway money. It's like RER money. Then you could build so many. Like Quebec, if it's going to have trams and not like a proper metro, it should have at least 4 tram lines, I would say. That seems like an appropriate number. I mean, potentially more. It's, almost at 1 million people. Montreal should probably have like 5 or 6 or 7 tram lines. I'm sure, Gatineau can have a couple tram lines. Maybe there's another place in Quebec that could have like 1 or 2 tram lines. But because the cost of delivering these projects is so high, they're just not happening. And so I really wish, there's like the nationalism element in Quebec is a double-edged sword. But I wish there would be a sort of constructive nationalism where it's like, let's build projects and build up infrastructure. There kind of is with Hydro-Quebec, but there isn't for public transport. And it's sad because Quebec could really show the rest of the country what's up, and it just doesn't. So that disappoints me. I'm still excited about the Quebec City tram. I hope it can be the beginning of, a virtuous cycle. Once the first line goes in, there's some obvious extensions that can be done, and those will hopefully not take as long or cost as much. And so you can kind of have one really good tram line, but Quebec really probably should have a couple different tram lines. There's talk of a line across the river to Lévis. That would be cool. But yeah, there just needs to be more. It does excite me though, because it would mean that another Canadian city gets rail public transport. And at that point, I think we'd be beating like the UK in terms of number of cities with trams or metros or whatnot. Not on intercity rail, but on urban rail, which I think would be a pretty cool achievement, even though the UK isn't necessarily the world leader. France is pretty great. Germany is pretty great as well. I'm going to quickly take a look at the chat, as I've been doing as I kind of go along. Go look at the chat, see what people are saying, and then address some of people's comments. And then I'll think if I have anything else to say on the Quebec City tram issue, and then I'm going to go into kind of open Q&A until the stream ends. Have you seen that Sean Duffy has given the Penn Station project to Amtrak instead of the MTA, and it will be a P3? Well, I'm not sure. The P3 element, probably not good. Though I think a station is less egregious than like a transit line because it's kind of more unitary and it seems like it could be better executed. I'm not sure whether MTA is pretty bad. Amtrak's also not great. I'd ask like an Alon Levy, who's better? I guess that it could be good if Amtrak is actually potentially better. Yeah, I guess Amtrak already threw runs, so maybe they'd be like, MTA, you should through run too, which would be great. Could you make a video about the Tyne-and-Wear Metro? No, but it's a cool system. Yeah, I was watching some POV videos of it recently. Go Transit, electrification and double tracking is moving too slow. It's not going to get done by 2030. Carlin Thomas, thanks for the super chat, but not happening. 2030 is 5 years from now, and there are approximately 0 wires up. Electrification is not happening by 2030. But that's okay. It sucks, and I think this is one of my cynical frustrations, is that Metrolinx is not good at building transit, and they do not seem interested in getting better at building transit, which I think is pretty undeniable based on everything. But the most egregious is Go expansion, because this is the project they've had it as long as they've had the Eglinton Crosstown, and in some ways it feels like they've made less progress. That being said, I have come around to the idea that Go Transit does not need to be fully electrified to be good. To be much better than it is today. I mean, I don't think I ever thought that, and I don't think that it's not going to be electrified. I just think that it's not going to be electrified soon. I think it's going to be delayed, and probably they're going to have all kinds of issues. What I will say is that, and yes, it's depressing, I know. What I would say is that if Go just operated 15-minute all-day service in both directions on every line, which they're not that far from being able to do, they would need more trains to do it. It would be the best. It would be probably better than the suburban train systems in New York, honestly. Not in extent, but in terms of service. And they're not that far from doing it. The Kitchener line technically has 15-minute service with the Up Express. The Lakeshore lines have had 15-minute service. It's just that they're not operating it all the time, but they have in the past. So that only leaves the Barrie line and the Stouffville line, both of which are being double-tracked right now, to get 15-minute service, and then we'd have 15-minute service everywhere. So I think the first phase of kind of Go Transit improvement is get everything to 30-minute frequencies, maybe 15-minute frequencies. The reason I say 30 is because, again, the problem is they don't have enough trains. Once you run into that issue of we don't have enough trains to get to 15 minutes, then I think probably the correct option is to buy some flirts like Ottawa has, which are very similar in terms of capabilities to a lot of electrical multiple units. They're not as fast, but they could be intercompatible, in terms of maintenance and stuff. Start buying those. They could just be diesel ones, or maybe they can be diesel hybrid ones, and just run those at 15-minute headways, maybe couple two up together for like a 160-meter train. That would be a dramatic improvement across Go Transit. Faster acceleration, better service. Electrification can kind of happen over time, but you could have really good 15-minute service right off the jump. And actually, to be honest, the London Overground, which for better or for worse sometimes gets compared to Go expansion, even though it's really more like a London suburban rail. It's radial. A lot of it was diesel for quite a while before it was electrified. Like if you look at the electrification of, I think, a couple London Overground lines, it was fairly recent. And so you can operate a good service with diesel. You want to get to electric, but we can have good service with diesel much sooner. And so I think that it's cynical about the electrification, less cynical about just good service. But they are being very slow with the double tracking, etc. They're doing it extremely slowly. I am just going through the stream here, and then so once I'm done going through the chat, I'll take Q&A until things get boring, and then I'll call it a night. Should they reform and pause the high-speed rail in Quebec tramway? I mean, they probably shouldn't reform and pause now, but they really should think about how they're approaching these things going forward. Quebec doesn't want population growth. It will compromise the language demographics. I think that they could probably still grow the population without compromising the language demographics, but I also think that's just bad. I think that I think that there's a lot of people who would love to move to Quebec who are turned off by the kind of craziness of like, you won't be able to talk to your doctor in any language but French. I think that a lot of people want to learn French, but they're afraid of like that kind of situation. It's like, I want to learn French, but in the meantime, what if I have to go to the doctor? And so I think just the approach it's not helpful for growing Quebec. And that means people who are actually willing to learn French and who would love to move there don't move there. And I think that that's not helpful. So that's my take on that issue. Just clearing through this. Okay, almost none of this is about Quebec City. Oh yeah, Istanbul has catenary less trams. Jay is saying, you can do the APS, which is the third rail for trams that Bordeaux has, Dubai has, Sydney has. It doesn't work in snowy climates, so it's not actually an option in Quebec, where there's like salt and rocks on, like a lot of rocks and sand on the road and stuff. It's not a thing that you can do. Just going through this. Whew, so many messages. This is very endearing. Thank you, everyone, for coming onto the stream. And if you want to watch the next one, check the link in the description. Make sure to set a reminder so you don't miss it. I'll be doing one every 2 weeks. Toronto's private reno of Union Station fell apart, and the city had to pick up the project after the private sector company failed. Yeah, that does seem like a real risk, though. To be fair, it seems like less of a less of a risk with New York. I feel like you sort of expect that they would be able to get it together, but then also it's New York, so who knows? What brought you to SF the other month? Oh, that's a long story. Just checking to see who's actually talking about the Quebec City Tram before I do Q&A. Yeah, it's crazy that Brisbane doesn't have more train frequency. It's really kind of, it's like a real weakness. Like Melbourne is not great, in my opinion, in terms of its train network and the fact that it's totally radial. Like, I think Sydney's quite a bit better there, but it's at least frequent. 30-minute, like, actually, in some ways, I would say Brisbane would be better off with diesel trains running every 15 minutes. I do think that frequency matters more than electrification, because as you can see with Brisbane, you can have electrification and it doesn't necessarily lead to frequency, whereas if you have frequency, it leads to ridership, which leads to more frequency, which leads to electrification, if that makes sense. But yeah, we're not going to rip out wires. I'm just, making a hypothetical point. 1 a.m. Eastern European time, jeez. Yeah, okay, only the Goblin was diesel. Still, that was one line. What do you think? Let's talk Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto as Canada 2036. What would your transit and infrastructure priorities be? Oh, I love this. So, Paige has talked about this idea of doing like a 2036 Olympics that's Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, which I think is really cool because Montreal hosted before, so it would be kind of cool, bring it back, but also Ottawa and Toronto would get it. What would my infrastructure priorities be? Well, yes, at that point, maybe you have to talk about if there's anything at the football stadium in Ottawa, maybe you do need to talk about some sort of higher capacity link to it. Maybe like Rem de l'Est comes back and it kind of connects to Olympic Stadium somehow at P9. That could be kind of cool. You obviously want frequent electric trains between the cities. I actually think if you look at it, there have been a lot of high-speed rail projects open for Olympics or for similar events, like Madrid-Seville for the World Expo. 2008, China opened, I forget what route, but a high-speed rail route to Beijing for the Olympics. The original Tokaido Shinkansen in Japan was for the 1964, I want to say, 4 Olympics, and they did some other stuff for 2020. In Korea, they built a semi-high-speed line to Pyeongchang for the 2018 Olympics. So high-speed rail definitely makes sense. I think for Toronto, the stadiums are already so well located for public transport. The only thing is maybe you do like more frequent Barrie Line service to Downsview Park and you host a bunch of Olympic events there. Like Downsview Park could fit, those cool river thing simulation type things where they do the kayaking and stuff. Build that in Downsview Park. That seems like the place to build something like that in Toronto. So I think that's what I would say my priorities would be. Also, I guess this is a good time to point out common fare system. We should have one fare card, which more practically means we should just be able to pay with our credit and debit cards in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and in the rest of the country. You can already pay for transit with credit and debit in Ottawa, Vancouver, and Toronto. But yeah, we need to add Montreal, need to make it better in Ottawa. And ideally also with a digital transit card, just to give people another option. And that would make it way more seamless and easy for people from any country to just use the card they already have to pay for transit. Okay, wow. So many messages. Okay. Okay, so I guess I'm just kind of going into the Q&A section of the stream. If you're just coming on now, I'm doing another stream in 2 weeks. Link is in the description. I have 2 new blogs. You should subscribe to them. I think they're going to be good. Great to see you. If you miss the rest of the stream, you can watch it after. It won't be that long. My goal is to try to keep these to an hour. This one's going to go a little long. I'm kind of getting started on this. I want to go for a walk because walking is healthy. But yeah, that's the goal with these streams, to try to keep them at a reasonable length and to be a bit more focused on the topics I talk about that I've kind of like predetermined, which should be in the description. Yeah, that's why I'm calling it TAKT with RMTransit. If you don't know what a TAKT is, you can Google it. For the 2032 Olympics, Brisbane is getting a heavy rail line to the Sunshine Coast, which is cool. Yeah, but yeah, the lack of more kind of urban rail is a bit strange. Oh yeah, so this is actually something I was thinking about. Someone mentioned the Charlevoix rail line for Quebec. Yeah, like that should run at least run a couple times a day with modern trains. They like tested a modern hydrogen train on it, and then which I think they had to do all kinds of stuff for because it's in horrible condition. But that would be a good project. Take that line, fix it, make it modern and nice. Like the rails are in terrible condition as far as I understand. Build nice stations. They don't have to be big, so they don't have to be very expensive, but just make them modern and nice. And buy something like what Ottawa has on the Trillium line, and that would be a huge upgrade. And also, ideally, extend the Charlevoix train to central Quebec City, because it's just kind of silly that you have to go outside of the city center to catch it, because the tracks do run into central Quebec City. Maybe people have comments on that in the chat. Are you familiar with the Tehran Metro in Iran? I didn't cover it, but yes, I am familiar. It has a weird line that has double-decker rolling stock pulled by electric locomotives. It's not that extensive. It's like 5 or 6 lines. Maybe it's 7 or 8 now, but it's not Chinese metro scale. It does use a lot of Chinese equipment, but it's like pretty big. Yeah, so yes, I am familiar. What are your thoughts on sidelining VIA for HSR and private companies? You know, realistically, it's bad. But I also find VIA Rail is so frustrating, right? I don't think that privatization, in the broad sense of like everything is privately owned, is a good thing. It hasn't been successful where it's been done. But VIA Rail does make it very hard to feel sympathetic to VIA Rail because they just operate things poorly, right? There's so many places where they could do a better job. They shouldn't make people line up like it's an airport. They shouldn't weigh bags like it's an airport. They shouldn't have one person in every car. They should provide better customer service. They should provide more reliable service, better stations. There's a lot of things that are within VIA Rail's control that they just don't improve, and it makes it hard for me to feel super sympathetic to them. So that's my take on that issue. But yes, they shouldn't be privatized. That's not a helpful approach. I was hoping the Ontario line would be open for the World Cup, but it's a Ford project, so that wasn't going to happen. Can I just say, I think this is not a good way of looking at this at all. This is part of the reason I started making YouTube videos. People have this, they say things like this, like, it's a project of the political guy I don't like, so it's bad, or so it's going to be delayed. But, do you really think that if the political party was different, it would be any different? It wouldn't. There's been other parties in Ontario who also didn't deliver public transport on time or quickly or whatever. It has nothing to do with Doug Ford. Doug Ford doesn't design the project. He doesn't do much of anything for the project. He didn't design the project. The Ontario line is moving pretty quickly. It's an over-designed project, so it's just harder to build than it probably should be, but it has nothing to do with Doug Ford, right? I think that kind of comment, like, it hurts the cause of public transport because it misdirects fault to politicians when it's actually like organizations like Metrolinx that are, at least as much to blame and have where the problems are more specific. You can say Doug Ford is just a guy who doesn't he just does crazy stuff, sure, but Metrolinx has things that they could actually improve. And when you say, oh, it's not going to be open because of Doug Ford, it's like, no, it's not going to be open because Metrolinx XYZ and a million other things. But also 2026 is too soon. Like, the project only started construction a couple of years ago, and it is a seriously big project. So I think it would be really tight to get it open by 2026. Like, that's a year faster than their original aggressive timeline date. What do you think of Metro Vancouver's new TransLink funding? Is it too unambitious? Yeah, probably. They could use more congestion pricing, please. What is a good discount metro? There is no such thing as a good discount metro. I think the best thing to do is to like get funding from external parties and build a system and then build on top of that. Because, metro helps build a better city, which has a better economy, which can afford to build more stuff. It's about also learning from the right places, right? So that you can build things cost effectively. Reese, what are you doing for a job these days? I'm parenting. That's my job. Yes. And blogging. Support me on Patreon if you want me to keep doing that. Do you think California High-Speed Rail in California will be finished? I hope so. But they're not doing themselves any favors, is what I'll say. It's not a good project, right? I saw a video recently that was sort of like, there are other bad projects, and it's like, yeah, but it doesn't make it a good project. The argument in response, which I've seen people from the US, like transit people, go, oh, like there's bad highway projects, and it's like, yeah, they're also bad. That doesn't make the transit project being bad okay, and it doesn't get it done faster, and it doesn't need to be bad. Other countries build it, and it's not bad. Why does it have to be bad in California? And if it's bad in California, you're not going to go build it somewhere else successfully, right? So getting good at it is actually important. Should the Quebec City tramway have all platforms to the right in the direction of travel? I see no reason for that. It's very unusual for a modern tram system to only have island or side platforms. Could you put together a blogger list with good YouTubers covering different cities? I'm actually working on something. What's your take on the new Riyadh Metro in Saudi Arabia? Cool system. It is in Saudi Arabia, so, yeah. There lots of money to spend and various other issues that tend to come with big projects. But it's nice. But the urban form is going to have to change, right? Like the metro, you can put a metro anywhere, but it's going to be hard for it to be super successful with an urban form that's very car-oriented, right? Like, I don't believe in the sort of not just bikes line of thinking that you need to have density to have successful transit. I think that's just false, and it's provably false. But it certainly doesn't hurt. And in the case of Riyadh, it really might hurt, the lack of density. So, you want density and good transit. The good transit's there, you need density now. And it is also a huge city, so some of the lines take a long time to traverse. Where in North America is the best case for through-running heavy rail tunnels? Well, a la the Asakusa line. I mean, like New York, Boston, obviously, though it wouldn't be like the Asakusa line. But Boston, and also New York. Yeah. How do you feel about the light rail in Norfolk, Virginia? I've heard of the Tide like 5 times. It can't be that good. I don't think the ridership is high at all, because I think it ranks very low. So, yeah, I don't think much of it is the sad truth. Though they should extend the Northeast Corridor there. Urban Americas. Thank you for the super chat. Wanted to say thank you for a great channel. Your analysis has been an inspiration, both as I became certified as an urban planner and started my own YouTube channel. I appreciate you. Thank you. I appreciate your message, and that's my hope, to inspire people to get involved in this topic. Go electrification will take longer now that they need a new CEO with experience because the interim CEO is a high-level bureaucrat. I think the CEO might be a problem, but the project has not been going well before the CEO switch. This probably won't help it, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. Thoughts on the Northlander coming back? It's nice, but it's going to operate not even daily. Like, I think it's only daily in summertime. It really should be daily. Yeah, they did delay the Burnaby Mountain Gondola, which is just it's just like the most obvious project that keeps getting delayed. I think it'll get built at some point because at some point some SFU graduate who's like a billionaire will just be like, "I'll pay for it." But yeah, that hey, it'd be a good project. Needs to get built. Someone saying Ford's record for construction isn't good because he sidelined the City of Toronto design and study of the relief line, and Ford has consistently used Metrolinx as a stiff arm for municipalities. I mean, this is why I think it's interesting to discuss these topics. I don't really agree. I don't think the City of Toronto's design and study of the relief line was good. I think it was bad. So I think this was an improvement. I think the Ontario line will probably, even though it started later than I guess the relief line might have, I think it will be finished faster because less of it is in tunnel. I think it's better in most ways. I think that this is kind of a media narrative, like that Ford had come in and like he did come in and disrupt something, but the thing kind of did need to be disrupted. The City of Toronto is not good on transit. Like it's just not. If you look, the last big transit project the city and the TTC delivered was the York subway extension, super delayed, super over budget. I would like the city to be good. It would be helpful if the city was good, but it's just not. Look at the streetcars in Toronto. Look at the lack of signal priority in various places. Look at the poor signal priority. The city is just not good at delivering public transport, and the idea that Metrolinx is sort of like disrupting that is a bad thing, I don't think that's accurate. Yeah, it's probably for the best that they're not building the Ontario line. Just looking here. Are you familiar with Africa's urban transit systems? Yes, that's what I'm covering in my next stream. Link in description. I'm going to be talking about that. I did a blog post, but I'm going to just kind of do like the stream version of the blog post. How do you feel about mid-sized North American cities running S-Bahn, JR-style regional lines or even tram trains? Well, I don't think you should North American cities, right? Okay, there are three countries that we're probably mostly talking about: Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. I think the U.S. is not looking great for any of that stuff. Canada maybe, but the thing is, it just doesn't seem likely with freight company ownership. That kind of operation just doesn't make sense with the way the systems are set up, right? For especially mid-sized cities, there's just not the funding and the kind of desire to build that kind of system. What's something you would say to young aspiring creators? I hope you enjoy making videos because you have to work for free for a long time and often for essentially free. And if you don't enjoy making them, yeah, it's unlikely you'll get to a point where your channel is successful enough. I cannot do a brief explainer of the LRT phenomenon because you cannot spell my name correctly. No, I mean, yes, I'm not going to do it because it does annoy me when people can't spell my name correctly when you can find my name online. And also, this is like the least conventional spelling. At least, like the peanut butter cup would seem like, you're spelling it conventionally and not trying to get it wrong. What do you think about private competition in transit? I mean, it's just like it's just kind of it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to discuss. There's like a couple places it happens that it makes sense, and then most of the time this topic gets discussed, and it's just like conservatives who are like there should be private competition. Yeah. Opinions on the HSR corridor from Toronto to Quebec. I would like high-speed rail, but I do not think they're going about it in the right way, and yeah. It's kind of a disappointing situation. They're following the same approach that Go Transit's following for their regional electrification project, which is not going well. And I wish that they had kind of, assessed that before deciding to do the exact same thing that they're doing. Should senior planners have more publicity, like Andy Byford? Not a senior planner. He's more of like a manager. The York extension was cheaper per kilometer than the Ontario line, but it's not, downtown. It's not downtown. It's they had to cut back the screen doors and everything. I'm not saying the Ontario line is great, but we're not comparing it with the York extension. We're comparing it with what the city would have built had they built something, and I do not think that would have cost the same as the York extension. Thoughts on the cancelled transit projects in the greater Montreal area? Again, Montreal and Quebec just doesn't seem serious about getting projects built in a way that Ontario didn't build anything for a long time. Quebec also didn't, but it seems like Ontario really wants to catch up. It doesn't seem like Quebec wants to catch up, which makes me sad. Thomas, thank you for the super chat. For nappies. We don't use that word here, but I know what you mean. So thank you. I appreciate that. I think Athens transit is underwhelming for a 4 million metro area. Still better than most American cities. Like, how many American cities with 4 million people have worse transit than Athens? Most, I would say. It used to be quite common for tramways to have only curbside boarding. Yes, when tramways were streetcars, so 100 years ago. It's not for modern systems, definitely not quite common, which I assume we'd be building in modern times, a modern system, right? Yes, I have a kiddo. Fatherhood's good. Talked about it in my retirement video. Thoughts on Randy Clark and the current state and future of the DC Metro? I don't talk about American things because of the whole, thing going on there. Randy Clark seems nice. The DC Metro is kind of a cool system. They really got to get it together, though. The fact that they're not doing a Toronto-style expansion, it's just, come on. You're the capital of the richest country in the world. Reese, you're looking great, physically and mentally, it would seem. Physically, mentally exhausted. Check out my other blog where I talk about these things. In North America, the state of urban planning and transit is really depressing. Do you have any tips on not burning out emotionally? North America is a continent. It would be like, it's so frustrating when people say North American urban planning. Canada is not like America. Seriously, go look at urban densities, go look at the vehicles driving around, go look at transit ridership. On urbanism, Canada is not like America. It's just not. So I think that's the first step, is distinguish that there are multiple countries and they are not all the same. Transit on demand, bad. That's basically what I have to say. Outside of completely rural areas, I think it's a bad idea. HSR funding model with station fees for private lines. We already know how to do high-speed rail. I think trying to develop new funding models, etc., doesn't make sense. The existing ones work. Acero says, for hype trains, choo-choo. Thank you for the super chat. Do you think Orange County in California would benefit from a light rail system or a more automated light metro system? I think automated light metro almost always makes more sense in American cities because American cities have big, wide streets that are not great for trams, for modern trams. You could do like a Stadtbahn type of thing, but in America, there tends to be a really big disincentive to run high frequency if it requires paying people. And so if it's automated, high frequency comes a little simpler. So I think automated metro makes way more sense. I didn't see this thing about Guelph in 2054. How can we stop politicians from using HSR for economic development goals rather than transportation goals? We'd be in better places without having to. We'd be in better places without having to serve Peterborough or Bakersfield. Yeah, definitely. I think this is just kind of the question in general, right? I think with transit and high-speed rail, which is, yes, a form of transit, the biggest issue that we face in the Anglosphere, generally speaking, is that there are so many forces pulling on transport projects or influences on transport projects that are not transport. We really need to get back to basics. I think almost universally, projects would be better if there was more of a focus on transportation instead of things that are not transportation, like economic development, like hiring local businesses, all of these things. If we just focused on transportation, doing it quickly, efficiently, I think all of these things would do well, and we wouldn't be dragging projects down with a million other priorities. I've just relocated to Toronto from the UK. Awesome. I just said awesome and pointed, but I meant awesome. Thumbs up. Streetcars are slow. How do you think they could be improved? I have written a bunch of blog posts about this. The switches are one of the problems. The TTC has bad policies, which is another problem. They run fast sometimes at nighttime when there's no traffic, so traffic is also a problem. It's a bunch of factors. But really, if you want to influence this, call your city councilor and tell them they're slow. Even if you're not like a citizen or whatever, you can still call your councilor and say, they're slow and suck and they should be better. Have a role for people like you to advise lead projects, or how do governments have a role for people like me? Governments don't really like talking to me. I've had very few interactions with politicians, especially in Toronto. It's been better in Quebec, to be honest, in Montreal. But yeah, I mean, they'd have to talk to people like me to start. And there's a lot of smart people in transit agencies and organizations who just kind of like are regular people. They're not in leadership roles. And I think transit organizations do a really bad job like elevating knowledgeable people to positions of influence and authority. Or at least, giving them a bit more power and control. Any dreams of good coast-to-coast rail in Canada? I mean, the best we can expect, I think, is like a daily service that's more reliable and a little faster than today. It's a huge country. It is very low density. I think it's not reasonable to expect some super high-speed thing. If America wasn't going crazy, maybe we could do something in combination with them, but, yeah, so not happening anytime soon. Nice PS5, bro. It better be. It mostly just sits there and looks like a nice PS5. I don't play games because I don't have time. For Quebec, did you look at all of the Tram Cité plan? Are they still doing that? It wasn't clear to me. I just saw that they're building the tram. I know that they had that plan before. I wasn't sure if they kind of dropped the rest of the plan. It seems like a fine plan. It's not amazing, but yeah, it's better than just the tram alone. So, stop spacing, switches, priority. Yeah. Basically, yeah. I think stop spacing is another huge thing. I can't believe I didn't mention it, but Schmitty did mention it, and that is, yeah, I've talked about that a lot in the past, actually. That's a huge thing that needs to change. There's a lot of things like that need to change. The politics are so stupid, right? Like, city councilors will block the TTC trying to remove stops. I think the TTC doesn't do a good enough job creating a broad program of stop removal in Toronto. There's blame all around, but the issue is that the priority is not transportation. The priority is everything but transportation. If the goal was just more frequent, faster streetcars, I think we'd be headed in the right direction. What are some good rules of thumb for managing conflicting interests in waterfront development versus shipping port functionality? I feel like this isn't the right... I feel like you need to hire a consultant, not ask in a YouTube live stream. Right-of-ways are overrated, Rebecca Winter. The Spadina streetcar has a right-of-way, and it's not very fast, right? Like, it's good, it's nice, it looks good, even though it's not even green track or anything, so that would need to be improved, but it's not the main problem we have. Message retracted by Thomas. I wonder what it was. I think Ezra Klein has a very good... I think the whole abundance thing and the coverage of California high-speed rail has been very good, and I am very disheartened when people go like, no, I don't... I've seen people criticizing it, and at least on the way he's talking about California high-speed rail, I think he's dead on. The focus is not getting high-speed rail. The focus is on a million other things, and that's why you don't get high-speed rail, and you do get the million other things. Tons of local people have been hired. It's going to all these other cities that, don't make it so that it is slower and more expensive to get it to the actual places where the most ridership will be, etc., etc. Do you like LA's sleek Stadler automated metro trains for the Sepulveda line? Yeah, they look good, but the way that project is being pursued is just crazy. It's just not good. So, yeah, it's sort of like... It's like the one silver lining of an otherwise pretty disappointing project. In a dream world, would you support China building Canadian high-speed rail like they have in other countries? it would have to be a very different world from the one we live in. But yeah, in a dream world where we're just like trying, the only thing consideration we have is maximize rail, sure. I am back streaming. You would get more respect if you looked older. Maybe if you had gray hair, a beard, and glasses. I do have gray hair. I do not have a beard because I don't want to have a beard. And I don't think how you look really matters at all. Please forgive me, says Thomas. Yes, you're forgiven. High-speed rail, air travel replacement, first and foremost. Waterloo Ion got shut down by freezing rain again. Ask them what they do in the Nordic countries. You know, like Denmark has trams. Stockholm has trams. Oslo has trams. Russia has trams. They don't seem to be getting constant problems with freezing rains. You know, Toronto has trams. I don't see problems constantly with freezing rain in Toronto. Okay, in California high-speed rail's defense, the Central Valley is a fairly populous area. But this is the problem, okay? A fairly populous area doesn't mean good for high-speed rail. Like, I think people have this idea that, okay, if we just put high-speed rail in a place with a lot of people, it'll be good, right? America has a lot of people and, like, no high-speed rail because the way the people are laid out matters a lot. Are they riding transit at very high levels today? Do Fresno or Bakersfield have tram systems? No, they don't. I think people have, it's the same as if you look at a city and someone draws a metro line and they just sort of like aim for big apartment buildings. You're missing what drives ridership, right? Existing transport links are more important than, you know, a couple apartment buildings. In the same way, the layout of these cities and the way people are already getting around matters. And like, do that many people want to ride a train from Fresno to Bakersfield? I just don't think, like, I'm sure there are a decent number, but they're not that big. And they're, you know, it's a very drivable distance between them. So it just doesn't seem to me like, I shouldn't say to me, it's not a good project. The arguments that get made that these places have a lot of people, that lots of places have lots of people where high-speed rail doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Dallas and Houston have a lot of people. They don't have high-speed rail. And even the plans that they have to build high-speed rail have tons of problems. And I don't see them as being, you know, better or worse than the plans to connect Fresno or Bakersfield. I mean, they are maybe slightly better in California, but not really. Waterloo region, the ion system is not extremely well run. It's got its own problems with speed. What are your opinion on the cons of light rail, such as freezing rain? That's not a con of light rail. That's just a weird problem that this one system has. It's not a problem with the overhead wires on all of the other trains in northern climates, right? Germany's approach to high-speed rail, not very good. France, Spain, Italy, all better. But Germany has a weird rail network, so it has to approach things differently too. Have you watched Nandert's LA-Venice line automated metro video? I don't think I watched a dedicated video, but I watched Nandert's stuff. It's really good. Yeah, urban sprawl is bad for high-speed rail. The anchor cities at the end are definitely more important, and I 100% think you create a more valuable line by starting high-speed rail and just slowly extending out of a big city than starting in the middle, because you would at least have one big city, right? Imagine, this is purely an example, but imagine LA to Bakersfield, right? There's a lot more people in Bakersfield who'd probably be wanting to travel to Los Angeles than to Fresno, right? And vice versa. Because a big city offers things people want to travel for: healthcare, shopping, events, career opportunities, business, right? Whereas two relatively small cities that are in geographic proximity, there's less things motivating people to travel back and forth between them, right? And if it's like a commuting thing, that's probably not what you want high-speed rail for anyways. The US has some moderately fast rail, yes. Australia not having high-speed rail, it's a bit... The populations are legitimately not that high, the densities are low, and the geography is difficult, so I think it's a bit... You know, it's an edge case. It's at the edge of where high-speed rail makes sense. Canada, it makes more sense because the geography is much easier, everything is nicely in a line, and there aren't mountains. Comments on the 2023 Vaughan Gondola proposal. Probably better than the buses today, but yeah, they should just do better buses. Thoughts on centralized versus decentralized? Yeah, I think that's, that could be an interesting topic for a whole stream. I think it's very interesting for a rail network to be decentralized, but it means you have to build it and operate it differently. Do you think an Ontario line extension down Dufferin is possible? Sure, it's possible. Clock-based scheduling for high-speed rail. I feel like this is also in the topic of decentralized versus centralized. Yeah, the thing is, commuting from Bakersfield to LA is probably not something you want to encourage, right? They should just be able to live in LA if they are working in LA, right? Like, high-speed rail doesn't really seem like the solution there. And it's the same people talking about, like, we need high-speed rail to Fresno because San Francisco... I've heard a lot of people say we need high-speed rail to the Central Valley because San Fran and LA have a housing problem. No, you need to fix the housing problem. There is no reason that you can't fix the housing problem in San Francisco and Los Angeles. The solution to that is not having people commute like an hour and a half on a high-speed train, which the high-speed line wouldn't have enough capacity for that kind of use if you planned on scaling it that way. Yes, Melbourne to Sydney being the fourth busiest air corridor in the world, for sure. But it is like a kind of unique case, right? Two cities that are big, but not like mega city big. They're not like, Sydney doesn't have 15 million people, right? So it's just like, it being the fourth busiest is, I think, just downstream of mountains. Distance being long for high-speed rail, right? Like, it would be a long corridor for high-speed rail. And so I think it's just, the reason it's busy is because, yeah, like, important big cities, but not necessarily big enough for high-speed rail. Not a ton in between them besides Canberra, which is not actually that big. It's an edge case. Better train service certainly makes sense, and I think I've talked about that before. Bless you. Do you think there's a frequency sweet spot? I feel like that's a whole stream. Transit isn't a solution to housing. Transit simply moves the housing problem to outlying areas. Yeah. What do you think the odds we actually get Alto are? 50%, 40%, 60%, somewhere in there. Decent proposals for high-speed rail on the New West Rail Bridge. I'm sorry, that seems silly to me. Okay, I think that's it. I went 30 minutes longer than I wanted to. If you're interested in the next stream, link is in the description. I'm going to be, I'm going to be doing that in 2 weeks. It's been great to chat with everyone. I hope I can come back and do this periodically, like every 2 weeks, fairly regularly. And also subscribe to the blogs. It's much appreciated. I am trying to still talk there.